Bob, Andy, Devshan, thank you for joining. I know Cory had said he was having some mic troubles. He might be able to hop in here in a few minutes. But I want to first off say thank you guys so much for um, volunteering your time to come and speak to us in the audience. I know we have some great questions. So, Devshan, I'll let you carry it away.
Thanks, Shane. Thank you. And once again, thank you. Thank you so much for joining, Bob and Andy. I'm sure Cory will join in after he gets past the technical difficulties. And so with that said, we'll dive right in. And so I just wanted to ask more about the S-18 committee and what does this committee look to solve through the standardization practices?
Sure. Let me start off thanking you guys for letting us talk about all the work, the great work this committee is doing. We have a rather large committee, over 100 people are members, and even more just participate in our discussions. What we're all focused on is advancing aerospace safety and making sure that we have effective safety management with our design products. And this is aerospace vehicles and systems. And we do this with three major processes. So we develop standards for the safety assessment process, a development assurance process, and then the practices after that vehicle has been designed in accomplishing in-service safety assessments. And so what that really means, if I was going to put it kind of try to sum that up in a sentence, is to say that we're assessing the behaviors that we design into our aircrafts and systems, figuring out the risks and the criticality of those risks, and then come up with a process to assure that we've addressed those risks to make sure the vehicles are safe.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So and also, so with that said, the next question I would go into is the two standards, ARP 4754 and ARP 4761. I think they're commonly referred to as the twin pillars of aviation. So what does this mean, and how do they relate to the other documents the committee produces?
Sure. I'll start this off and then hand it off so I don't speak the whole time. So the twin pillars, 4761 is the safety assessment process. 4754 is the development assurance process. And they're very closely related ARPs. And we like to even release them together when we do updates just to make sure that we're synchronized. The 4754 development assurance process basically first creates this framework within which we can make sure we're developing in a consistent methodology, the systems and the behaviors from first concepts of the functions and behaviors all the way through the implementation in the end. And the safety assessment process looks at those functions and those systems, figures out the risks, and once it figures out what those risks are and what's critical, it tells that framework how much more effort it needs to put in to address that. Because we know we don't just have human errors in the cockpit, we have human errors in development too. So we add more rigor, more activities that we need to do in that development process that 54 defines based on 4761. And then 4754 carries that through, and 4761 at the end, that safety assessment process says, yep, that work was done and we have addressed these safety assessment issues. So those are kind of a very high level of how those twin pillars interact. There's also a case study that SAE did on this not too long ago with interviews of Eric Peterson, former vice chair of the committee, and myself. And I think that's available through SAE still. But we have a number of AIRs that are in work, and we have a few active subcommittees too. I'm going to let Andy talk about the AIRs, and I'll let Cory talk about his subcommittee, S-18A. So Andy, why don't you talk about those AIRs?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll take the ball. Shane, can you put up the first slide? Okay. My slide's a bit corrupted, but basically, these are the current works which have been published from S-18. You can see the 4754 and 4761 at the bottom of the page there, and a number of AIRs at the top, starting with the Development Assurance Plan for Integrated Systems, AIR 6110 is an example which basically goes along with 54A. And in fact, that will be included in the latest revision of 54 when that comes out shortly. I want to talk a little bit about the next one, 7209. So just finally, the fourth AIR on the page there is the development of atmospheric neutron single event effects analysis for use in safety assessments. So that's the SAE document, and it's got a lot of useful information there. So AIR 7209, if we can flip to the next slide. So unfortunately, it looks like the formatting's got a bit messed up here. But basically, sorry, you've gone over the next. That's the one, yeah. So this document, the rationale for this document was to provide a high-level set of principles for development assurance. Bob mentioned development assurance being important in the system safety aspects, and the principles are meant to address both the industry and regulatory experience of applying the ARP 4754 across a number of different applications on a number of different aircraft and systems. It doesn't mandate specific processes to meet each development assurance principle. And in fact, the users of the document are responsible for presenting their own development assurance approach to regulators. So just a little bit of background behind this AIR. Industries relied on 4754 for guidelines for development assurance processes, but there has been some challenges along the way. And there's just four sub-bullets there, which are basically some of the challenges that have been encountered in the use of 4754. Some potentially effective development assurance methods are not addressed currently. For example, formal methods, model-based systems engineering, STPA. Also, novel technologies, which weren't even around at the time that the document was written back in 1996. The first revision of the document was released. And so neural networks, AI, ML, just weren't around, so not included currently. And the third bullet there, some of the type cert applicants have had difficulty getting acceptance for existing company processes and practices. And part of the reason for that is that fourth bullet, that there's been some misinterpretation by some of the regulatory authorities. So basically, yeah, those are the challenges that we've had along the way. And that's the reason behind this document, which came out basically through a number of different standards organizations, including obviously SAE S-18, because we're the ones that are responsible for 4754, but GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, also were interested in coming up with a high-level document that could then put forward exactly what the principles are that we have to show. One of the challenges has often been when there's a change to type design, how do you tailor the 4754 process for the activity that you're doing? You don't need to follow the complete process. And the idea is that this document will show you the important principles. I've probably spoken for too long on that, so I guess I'll hand over to Cory now to talk about S-18A.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. S-18A was a subgroup that was started about 4 years ago, 3 years and change, that it was originally put together as a working group to address autonomous aircraft, but we soon realized that the need was much, much greater. And the kind of the purpose of the group is to take a look at the two ARPs and figure out what needs to be adjusted, what doesn't cover things like autonomous aircraft or UAM or eVTOL, and it's really turned into a fantastic working group. Then our current document right now, AIR 7121, I'm sorry that I don't have any slides, is really kind of a statement of concerns as to where we think that there is need for some guidance, whether that be in the ARPs or not, regarding the interfaces of those two processes to these new products. And we are on schedule to have, that AIR we hope to have in ballot by the end of the year. Keep your fingers crossed, but we're work is progressing very, very rapidly on that.
All right, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for the informative answer. And so I would like to ask, how did each of you get involved, and why?
Okay, I'll lead off. So I actually got involved after I took an SAE class on 4754A. The 4754A revision had come out, and the company that I was at wanted to do training. So we brought Eric Peterson, who was the vice chair of the committee at the time, came and gave the SAE training, and he basically invited anybody who wanted to attend that S-18 meeting to come in and participate in that conversation. And we did. I did it with a few other people from the company. It was really good discussions were happening there. I always appreciated the process. I love a nice consistent process, so that's what I was looking to help contribute to updates to that. And as an engineer, you can always find improvements, so I was definitely going there with some ideas in the back of my mind to help work towards the next iteration and look forward to making sure these documents work for future technologies.
Great. Andy, you want to? I think you're on mute, Andy.
Andy, you're muted.
Andy, you're muted.
Yeah.
Why do I always do that? Sorry, guys.
Someone has to, and you did it.
Talking
So
away,
we're
you
good.
couldn't hear a word. I know. Yeah, I guess my first involvement really was with RTCA. In that I joined a company back in the UK when I was still living there, and called Ultra Electronics Controls Division, and we won a contract on the Bombardier-8 Q400 aircraft, which was a brand new type cert program at the time. And in order to win that program, we had to follow ARP 4754, which had just come out back in 1996, and also the two documents, DO 178B and DO 254. So maybe if you could just flip down 2 slides, Shane, please. So this is straight out of 4754A, and it shows the documents there, 4754 in the middle in yellow, and then 254 and 178 at the bottom. So yeah, I got involved a little bit in reviewing DO 254, and before it came out, our engineering manager was on the committee. And then jump forward a few years, and I was working in Switzerland for Pilatus aircraft. We had the first Pilatus aircraft with an IMA system on board, and I got involved in the document there, which is between ARP 4754 and the 2 DO documents, 254 and 178, and that's DO 297, guidelines for integrated modular avionics. And I got involved in particular in the safety assessment section of that document, one of the sections that I was involved in the subgroups working. And through that, I got involved with S-18. Jump forward another couple of years, and I started work at Boeing, working for GE at the time. And I went along to my first S-18 meeting back in 2005, which happened to be in Seattle. And I've been working on the S-18 committee ever since then. So I'll hand over to Cory. That's my story.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well, the easy and glib answer is that because I worked for Bob. But really, it's I joined the development assurance group at Textron Aviation after doing spending a long time doing in aerodynamics, but essentially being a system safety person within aerodynamics. My primary job was doing failure analyses and determining failure condition criticalities for flight control failures. Since I was kind of the head of since I was one of the main simulator people at Textron at the time, flight simulators. So because of some stuff that I had done with regards to getting the simulators kind of in working shape there, Bob tapped me to join his nascent development assurance group. And so then I had this crash course that I had to take of ARP 4754, which I'm guessing that a lot of people on the call who are maybe coming in from, hopefully people that are here coming from the groups that AIR 7121 will service are kind of in the same boat of trying to learn an awful lot of stuff, an awful lot of like theoretical and high level stuff really fast. And I got into it, and I was really interested in the whole process of how do you negotiate things and how these discussions go. And Bob was very encouraging about getting us involved with S-18 because of his experience that he had described. And so, listening to calls, finally got a chance to go, did my time as liaison, and finally became a full voting member. There's just something about it that I really enjoy, being able to share ideas with people from all over the industry and meet people from all over the industry. And it's been very, very fulfilling for me so far, and let's hope it continues.
Thank you, Cory, for that. So going on to the next question. So how do you come up with the recommendation for the standard? And can you tell us more about that practice?
So let me hit the broad ones again, and then we'll hand off. So the committee as a whole, as I mentioned previously, we have 100. I think we're over 100 now voting members, and just so many more participants who engage in discussions with us. I'm also chair of S-18H, which works closely with the G10 committee, and these members bring their perspectives from their different companies, from their experience. We have many regulators that participate: FAA, EASA, ANAC, just a great deal of participation from all over the world. And we work specifically to really broaden this audience of participants. Obviously, we can get comments, or you can always provide comments to a standards body on that document, but engaging in that conversation and that discussion really helps us develop and identify where the needs are in the industry. So a lot of it actually comes internally from these groups, from new people coming into our committee. We, of course, get requests from regulators, or requests from industry organization. Andy mentioned the 7209. So there's a number of aspects there. I'll let Cory talk a little bit more about S-18A and what's been going on with building that advanced air mobility audience and participants.
That's been, thank you. It's really been interesting to see that come up from the ground. It was started as really this autonomy, is labeled an autonomy working group, and I think it's actually still labeled that on the S-18 in standard works. I might need to get that changed finally. But it's been very interesting to see kind of the people come in, and you obviously have some people come out because of leave because of changes in work commitments and changes in priorities of industry and such. But what I really, really like about SAE, not to be too much of a sales pitch, is that everybody is an individual contributor. They're not a designated representative of their company. So you can have something like S-18A where you have Boeing and Joby and Textron Aviation and Wisk and X-Wing and Reliable Robotics all in the same room, and everybody's voice is equal. Nobody gets to throw their industrial weight around, and you then get to see who's got the real working knowledge and who's got the real working ideas, and those that don't get caught up to speed pretty darn quick. It's been really a joy to watch, and I'm actually a little bit sad that this webinar is at this time, because it's right over the top of my S-18A weekly meeting that I would normally be at. So, but I'm sure the guys will be happy that I'm pitching the committee.
Let Andy talk about. So he's taken over the management of our external organizations, which is actually a pretty tremendous task. We talked to a lot of external organizations. So let Andy take that away.
There are a lot of external organizations that we interface with. I mentioned Gamma when I was talking about AIR 7209 because they were quite fundamental in kicking off that AIR, along obviously with S-18. But there are a number of S-18 committees. I also mentioned RTCA, so that there are basically interfaces between the S-18 committee and the various propulsion committees. Obviously, I mentioned the RTCA on software and airborne electronic hardware side, but also on security, which is one of the big aspects at the moment. But we also, going back a little bit into Cory's patch, if you like, we have representatives who are responsible for the ANSI roadmap. So we get reports back. The S-18 committee has a plenary meeting, a total committee meeting, if you like, once every 3 months. So there's 4 a year, and we get reports back at each of those meetings from these other committees on the work that they're doing. And it's a way of finding out where we need to either include something in one of our documents, create a new document, revise one of our documents, or whether we can work with them and help them in authoring their document. So it really is a collaborative process, and it's one that's exciting. But as Bob was saying, there are a lot of committees out there. Mm-hmm. SAE has a lot of our interfaces are with other SAE committees, but yeah, there is also RTCA, and especially on the general aviation side, as ASTM for the Part 23 regulations, which is a big change now because it's performance-based rules for Part 23, and so a lot of the meter compliance are now within the ASTM specs. So we have to know what's happening there to make sure that we're up to date with any developments.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's that's all I've got to say on that. Thanks, Devshan.
Thank you, Andy, for that. And yeah, so with that, so who in the aerospace industry should be familiar with using this standard?
Okay, I'll pick that one up again. Okay. as I've just been speaking. Everybody. In particular, I guess it's the regulators, but in terms of the people that I interact with as part of my day job, it is everybody who really should be aware of these documents. Everyone is responsible for aircraft safety and aerospace safety. So really, from my perspective, everyone can be involved. Everyone should be aware of the documents. Mm-hmm. As you were saying, Cory, Bob dragged you in. Bob, I think you said it was Eric who offered you to come in and join the committee. But it is really open to anyone who's prepared to come in and work. That's the big thing. We do have different categories of membership. You can be on the mailing list if you just want to find out what's happening within the committee, which documents are coming up for revision, which documents have been revised, or you can be a liaison when you initially join the committee, up to someone who then has once you've been to. We talked about the plenary meetings, quarterly meetings. Once you've been to a number of those meetings, then according to our committee charter, then you're entitled to vote on the documents. So you then have the ability to to make your comments on the document and vote whether you accept the document or whether you want these revisions to be done before you're going to accept the document. And then, so that's on the industry side. On the regulator side, a lot of the documents that we work on, the initial interest in producing documents come from the regulators, in fact. The whole S-18 committee came out of a CERT integration team that was put together by the FAA, and that was how the whole thing was kicked off. We do get a lot of participation from various authorities, not just the FAA, in our meetings. But yeah, so not only it's not only the industry, it's the regulatory authorities in addition.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Andy, for that. So yeah, this question I would like to ask Bob. So what is the makeup of the committee, and what kinds of perspectives participate?
Yeah, so we actually give an orientation at the beginning of our plenary sessions, because we have a really large committee, and it's an international committee. We have over 100 voting members, but we have even more participants. So we have a couple hundred people who are involved. We're doing WebExes and as well as these in-person meetings to just coordinate all of that. And we're getting people from not just the transport category aircraft like Airbus and Boeing, which of course participate, but from all scales of GA aircraft, rotorcraft, and we worked particularly hard to bring in the advanced air mobility as that was spooling up to help put together the S-18A committee that Cory chairs. And so this is international. We have to find that time zone that works for the most people. And so we're normally 10 o'clock Central Time is the zone I'm in, is kind of the perfect hour for Toulouse and Seattle. But we have people in Japan and people in China, and so it's a little challenging to make all of that work. But it's a really diverse group, and we have these quarterly meetings where we gather together in person, because that way we can all kind of be on the same page in the same time zone. And also, we can look at the perspective of what other parts of the industry. So not only do we have, the airframers, we have suppliers, we have some consultants on the process as well. We also have academics that participate, helping develop some standards too, like STPA and how that works with our twin pillars. So we're working AIR on that. So it's pretty diverse and a lot of different perspectives.
Nice. Thanks, Bob, for that. So yeah, and again, Andy, I know you spoke on regulators earlier, but I just wanted to ask you, what is the involvement of regulators with your committee, and why?
The regulators are basically responsible for two things, really. They're responsible for the rules, the Part 20, 25, 23, 27, 29, as they're referred to. So they generate the regulations that you have to comply with in order to certify your aircraft. They're also responsible for providing guidance information. So the guidance information is the means of compliance to that regulation. And the role of the standards organization, I did mention a little bit about ASTM, because that's slightly different. But in terms of, if we think just Part 25 for a second, basically the way that's worked traditionally is that the FAA have produced the rule. They've produced an AC document, which would then call up industry standards like 4754, like DO178, DO254, DO297. Those standards will be called up in the advisory circular material, which basically provides the means of compliance. Part 23 is a little bit different. Now they've gone from prescriptive rulemaking to performance-based rules, and the means of compliance is then in the standard itself. So that's a little bit different. But as I mentioned, we've got participation from a number of different authorities, not only the FAA and the EASA, but also Transport Canada, ANAC, CAAC even. We've had one of our S-18 meetings, or two of our S-18 meetings, I think, over in China. So we do get participation from across the world. It's a truly international committee from that perspective. I mean, I have been out to when I was in China. We had a big conference in Shanghai, and gave a presentation there. So it does go across the world.
Okay.
And the different authorities, the different regulatory authorities.
All right. Thank you, Andy, for that. So this next question is for Cory. So I would like to ask how SAE has helped and supported in the whole process of developing standards. I know you touched a little bit upon that before, as in having a voice apart from the industry for each committee member. If you can just talk about in the whole process how in developing standards, how SAE has helped and supported.
How SAE has helped? It's been fantastic. To start with, Judith Ritchie from SAE was instrumental in getting S-18A up and running, and it really was a big cheerleader for getting people in and supporting us, especially in the early shaky days when we weren't quite sure what we were doing and what we were going to do, but we knew that there was something that needed to be done in that standard, within that standards organization, or within, to write standards for that particular part of the industry. And she brought in, she tapped in all the right people to start that discussion. I was glad that Andy mentioned Transport Canada, because Bob didn't, because we had kind of a unicorn in S-18A in the beginning of Jim Marco, who had just retired from Transport Canada and was absolutely invaluable at providing what would be the kind of the regulator's mindset in that committee when the early work on AR 7121. So I just wanted to shout out to him. But yeah, Judith was instrumental in setting it up, and of course, we can't go without at S-18. We can't go with the entire time without mentioning Kevin Byers, who takes care of us so well in terms of logistics, in terms of keeping things on track. He treats us so well that we go out of our way to treat him well. It has been everything runs super smooth thanks to Kevin. And then in terms of starting standards, really it's getting everybody from the industry together and asking, okay, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? Well, can we standardize it? How can we kind of come down to a common understanding of things? Andy and I are both also involved in SAE's G34 committee, which is looking at writing a standard for certification of machine learning items in aviation. And there, Erica Sampson is doing a great job, even though she's relatively new, but Kevin trained her, so she's going to know her stuff. Has been doing a fantastic job at getting us moving in the first kind of herding us into the right direction of getting a useful product out. So there's some definite challenges with that committee that we don't have in such a well-oiled machine that S-18 is, not S-18A, but it's been nothing but good experiences for us for SAE. I can't say enough good things about it.
Thank you so much, Cory. And so before I go to my last question, I want to thank Bob, Andy, Cory. Thank you for joining, and thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And so my final question is, anything else you would like to add or say to the folks that have joined the webinar today?
I think from my perspective, I'll dive in. As I mentioned previously, S-18 is open to anyone who would like to join. You just need to contact Kevin, our staff representative. If you join the committee, you have to be prepared to work, because not only do we have the quarterly meetings, there are weekly, bi-weekly WebEx meetings between those quarterly meetings. There's work to do, but it is fun. And just one last thing I'd like to say, you mentioned earlier about who needs to know about the standard, about 4754, 4761. I thought about it when you were just speaking, Cory. You mentioned G34, and that's one of the things that we've done. We've made sure that G34 members read 4754 and 4761, because there's a lot of very, very intelligent folks on that committee from the data analytics world, but they don't really understand aircraft certification and system safety. So, as I say, it does affect everybody. If you're responsible for anything on the aircraft, whether it's machine learning or artificial intelligence, whatever it happens to be, you need to understand the basics of system safety and type certification.
Thank you very much for that. So, Bob, Cory, Andy, thank you so much for joining, and really appreciate it. And I would like to hand it over to Shane to take it over. Thanks.
Yes, thank you guys. This information was plentiful. Appreciate the good conversation. I did want to just mention to the crowd, if there was anything that they might have said or you want to re-see, these interview links do go onto our YouTube page, which I'll post here shortly, and you can review the interview. If you guys have one more second, looks like we did have one question from the crowd. Back to when you were touching on the committee involvement that you have already. You mentioned 100 voting members and even more participants. How do you make sure that everyone feels like they have a voice, but you're also moving forward with your revisions of standards?
Yeah, it is a challenge for us, right? Both logistically and practice-wise. So there's three major fronts that we kind of approach this problem with. I mentioned the quarterly meetings are a big part of this, and trying to get those in person is really important, because we can get a lot of people on the same time zone. And even when we do that, we also have WebExes to try to bring in as many people as we can for specific topics on specific sections. Andy and Cory have both mentioned the WebExes that we do. So we have calls recurrently between these plenaries, and we try to find the right hour to work on that. But of course, as I mentioned, generally you're looking between Toulouse and Seattle for time zones and the right time to make it work for everybody. So that still limits us globally. But the third front is just our data management, how we use our standard works 2.0 now to be able to put our draft products out there for the other committee members to see. If they can't make those calls, they can still look at the work that we're doing and leave comments on that. There's a discussion section in standard works. The committee, this committee web interface. The documents are out there. We try to keep that all public and pretty well organized so that people can go in and provide comments if they can't make those calls, and continue to provide input. We try to keep the discussions as focused as we can, and that in the meeting, that's the key. Is here, this is what we're talking about. This is the extent of, maybe if we're talking about a revision, this is the extent of the change, and we have to maintain scope. Same thing with the meeting or with a new document. So just meeting, good meeting practice is the other side of that. So those three fronts, and then end focus are how we get that done. It's not perfect, but we make it work. So and we also accept any input on that too, to find new ways, doing better ways to do those things.
Yeah, that was very insightful. I mean, it sounds like you guys have came a far way in herding everyone together to work towards a common goal, which congrats. And also, once again, thank you guys. Appreciate it. We'll send out in case you missed it. And we also have the YouTube link below if anyone wants to review.